Please, please put your speakers on mute for now, your microphones. Do we have any visitors? I know one out there at least. Oh, we got Matthew from Oakville High School. I see him out there.
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, that I'm trying to get used to using my son's computer. So thanks for the invite as a new member. So
Good to see you.
Learning some new tactics as fly fishing is that's a tough one for me. So I'll take everybody's 2 cents when we can start to do things.
We all struggle at times anyway, so no big deal. Any other visitors? How about fishing reports? Who's been catching them? Uh-oh, nobody's catching, huh? Okay.
Hey, I've been catching them.
Who is? Who's that?
That was me, Mark. And the fishing's been pretty good down here.
We're at on the current?
On the Current River, yeah.
What part?
Between Baptist and Cedar Grove. Between Baptist and Cedar Grove.
Any special patterns?
Yeah, what I've been doing well with, I came up with a little caddis emerger I call an electric caddis. Actually, it's a modified version of my original electric caddis. And I fish it under a size 14 Renegade during the hatch. And if they're not taking the Renegade, they're taking the emerger. And it's then the dry fly. It's basically, you know, that Logatron flat braid that's kind of a Kelly green for the body. And then I put a little, I wrap it up with a black bead on a caddis style hook of the black bead. I put a little bit of black dubbing on the front up there by the bead with a turn of partridge soft tackle, and that's it. And it's simple. Working effective.
Good.
Works in the park as well there at Montauk.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
When
easy
is
fly, easy soft tackle.
Sorry. What time's the hatch come off?
It starts around, probably 9 o'clock in the morning and continues on pretty well through the day, off and on. Just depends on the day, of course. Right now, they're out, they're hatching. Also, we're getting some good mayfly hatches coming off. I haven't fished the mayfly hatch this week, and mostly I've been just concentrating on the caddis hatch, and they're all the time pretty well. About a size 16, 10 elk hair caddis if you're going dry.
Sounds good. I'd like to hear some success.
Or I like a Renegade instead of a elk hair.
How's that working?
Pardon?
Okay, well, moving on to education. I don't see Jim out there. Steve, out there for our treasurer?
Yeah, I'm here, Dan. Basically, there's really not much going on. As I submitted a note in the monthly news article, there are about 6 people who have donated to help offset some of the fixed expenses. And so far, we've collected donations of about $550. So I want to thank those individuals, here during the meeting for making a contribution to help offset some of the costs for the club, since we don't have any fundraising or any activities to generate any income. So thanks to those people. And if anybody else wants to contribute, just mail it to my address or to the post office box. And it is tax exempt, and we'll give you credit and notification. So appreciate it. But otherwise, there's really no activities, Dan. And besides the donations, haven't had any income at all or expenses.
New members?
Not recently, no.
Okay. All right, well, we'll hold out for that. Sounds good. Thanks, Steve. I spoke to Scott Durrell about conservation and nothing really going on. I told him I would be interested in going down to Montauk for July. Remember that, Mark? For the
Yeah,
sampling.
oh, yeah,
And he said, well,
yeah, you
if we can
bet.
get 3 or 4 people together to do it, he said, let's do it. So I'm opening the gauntlet, I guess. So I'd like to go down and just fish, if nothing else. But I'd like to take a sample. So he said he's open to it. And if we can get 3 or more people to do it, maybe be good. Heck, Mark, you can even go, I guess, really, if you want to.
Yeah, I might be able to attend as well. I do work during the summer as a ranger and make my way up that way.
You can sneak onto Montauk, couldn't you? Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll hold out hope for that. Okay, how's that sound? How about membership? Is Al on? I don't see Al.
That
Do you?
sounds good.
Hey, Dan, when in July is that activity, if you want to make the dates? Do you know the
Second
date?
weekend, isn't it?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Let me look that up. Second weekend is the 9th, 10th, and 11th. Do we see Al out there? I do not. Okay, moving along. Then, Jacob, what's going on with communications?
Nothing really groundbreaking. Website and calendar are up to date. Hopefully we'll have the June newsletter out a little earlier than the May one went out. If you do have any articles or content, pictures, etc. for the newsletter, you can email them to me at ozarknewsletter@gmail.com. Usually they're due sort of let's look at the calendar here. Let's say that second Tuesday, the June 8th. We'll try to make that the deadline this month so I can get it out on the 10th. But yeah, sooner people send me their material, the quicker the website and newsletter get updated. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Chris. What's up? Ways and means.
Ways and means, nothing to report. It's, without a live meeting, we don't have much going on. So got nothing.
Yeah, a little tough there. Okay. How about
Speaking of which, I'm not sure if I missed anything, but is there talk about the possibility of a live meeting next month?
not quite there yet, I don't think.
Why is that?
Perhaps we'll talk about it. I was kind of thinking
Talk about it.
maybe more like August. We'll see.
Why not June? Here's why I want to bring this up now is because I think with probably very few exceptions, because I have a lot of respect for the members having pretty good common sense for vaccinations, that we probably have a vast majority, probably in the 80-90% range of members doubly vaccinated. And as you can tell from what's going on, at least in Missouri, things are opening up to a vast extent. I don't understand what would be the risk or the harm in having a live anything right now. And if you have some information to the contrary, I'd like to hear about it. I'd like to make it an open forum here in front of the 20 or 25 people we have online.
Okay. I pretty much agree with that. Steve, Antonik, what about the parks? What do they say as far as our room?
You don't have a room. Chris will have to come up with a place to have the meeting.
Queenie is
that-
out, or is it just out right now?
It's just out right now. When we get reset up, we'll redo it. We weren't planning on anything to the fourth quarter. The hell was that? Fourth quarter is where we were talking, and that's what I've talked to them about last time. Nothing changed on that.
Okay, I'd appreciate knowing who the contact person is, Steve, because I'd like to can do about moving that date up.
It's a board. It's a board decision. You know,
Right.
when we have a board meeting, we'll talk about it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Chris. Richard, I don't see Richard out here. Is Richard there for outings?
No.
Okay. We have some outings coming up, of course. They are all private. You do them yourself. We have rooms reserved at Montauk, etc. Still open for discussion, but nothing official as it's been for the last while. So that's status quo. David, programs, I don't see David out here, do we?
I don't see him.
I don't see him either. Steve Antonik, what's going on?
Well, we're talking about having catch and release, which would be maybe the first official outing. And just so everybody knows on the dates, that's November 12th, 13th, and 14th. Don't know. We don't know if that's going to happen, but we are planning on it. That just put a bug in everybody's ear. We'll know more about maybe August if we're going to do it or not. Just so everybody think about it. That's all.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, President's report. I sent another note out to Hannah Yates. I don't know about the Channel 5 interview. It's kind of looking doubtful, but we'll see. I also sent a reminder out to Jay Nixon about that one-page legal description of being on the water. I have not heard back on that either. I did get a email from Christopher Chivetta, I believe his name, at Innsbruck, and they are interested in learning to do some more fly fishing. They actually stocked a pond on their properties, and I've been invited out to go and meet him and do some fishing. So that's a possibility. We might hook up with him. I don't know. It's still in the works, and this will be after Memorial Day, obviously. So that's what's going on. Anybody else have anything to speak of quickly? If not, I'll turn this over to Mark Van Patten, an old friend of the club who has many things he's done with fly fishing, too numerous to mention. And he's got some more ideas going on. And I turn it over to him right at this point in time. Mark.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with everybody. I heard Steve on there. Steve, good to hear from you. We've known each other for a few years, and I'm sure that some of the other members are on there that we probably have met along the way. I've always considered Ozark Fly Fishers part of my family, because associated with the group for a long time. And I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the things going on down this way. I don't know if you all know, but I retired from the Department of Conservation in 2016 as a string team biologist and a fisheries biologist, and moved down to Shannon County on my little farm down here along the Current River. I've been spending a lot of time fishing down here. I work summers as a seasonal interpretive ranger for the National Park Service here along the Current River. I'm kind of your upper Current River guy. I cover everything from Montauk down to Round Spring. Spent a lot of time around Acres and Welch Spring, and then Baptist and Tanvat in that area, as well as Cedar Grove. Been doing quite a bit of fishing. But one of the things I've been most involved in here recently and over the winter is a new organization that I'm on the board of called Ozark Rivers Foundation. And it's something that some of you might be interested in becoming part of. We basically are a foundation that partnered with the National Park Service, in particular the Ozark National Scenic Riverways, as a kind of a friends group. We raise money to help with projects that they just simply can't get funding for, to preserve some of the old structures, like for example, the Mount Zion Church, the Howell Maggard Cabin, just different things along the river. Also to help promote its heritage, its cultural and recreational aspects throughout the community and throughout the state. So it's a great organization, and you can go out to Facebook and just put in Ozark Rivers Foundation. As opposed to OFF. Some folks might get us confused. But anyhow, ORF, as we like to call it, a great opportunity to give back something to a stream that you may love to fish and enjoy camping on or floating and just being part of down here. So I'd like to invite all of you down, of course, to come share the waters with me, catch some trout. By the way, there's been some really nice fish being caught recently. And even in the park at Montauk, I understand a lot of the people that have been catching some nice fish in there. I went up there a couple of weeks ago and just had a great day, and nothing I caught was small. They were all very nice fish. So good opportunity. Also, I'm going to do a shameless plug. I wrote a book about growing up in the Ozarks. It has it's just short stories, and there's some fly fishing in there, of course, because I was raised by my grandparents who were purist fly fishers. My grandfather was a purist dry fly fisher. He believed anything less than a dry fly was the same as bait fishing. And so he used to give my grandmother an awfully hard time about her nymph fishing. But anyhow, the book is called, I'm going to hold it up. I don't know if you can see it very well. Moonshine and Watermelons and Other Ozark Tales edition. Barnes and Noble and I don't know, numerous other places and bookstores. So if you're interested in just a easy read that's got a lot of humor in it, Moonshine is a part of the story, but I also am a moonshiner. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But I think you'll find it fascinating, interesting, and just a fun and quick and easy read. If you go out to Amazon and read some of the reviews, it's got great reviews, and it'll give you a better idea maybe of what other people are thinking about the book and what they're and stories in there as well. But most of it took place when I was young, as a child here in the Ozarks. So that's out of the way. I wanted to talk more about ORF. I've got a little flyer here to show you, and basically this is just a prop to allow you to kind of get the idea of the logo, so that when you're out on Facebook or wherever, you'll recognize it and maybe take the time to read up on it. And if you do get interested and you want to become a member, we have various giving levels, and we provide at certain levels you can get a hat or a t-shirt or a jacket with the ORF logo and everything on it, to show that you're a founding member. And anybody who joins in the next during this year will be considered a founding member. And of course, there's always opportunity to be on the board and have some input on how things are run and where the money goes. Now, I got all that out of the way. I'm assuming some of you would like to talk fishing. So I talked about one of the flies that I've been using on a regular basis that seems to be effective is a little soft tackle caddis emerger, but also a nice size 16 or 18-10 elk hair caddis has been very effective here right now, currently, and has been for about 2 months. Also probably continuing for the next couple of months. We've got real good mayfly activity starting to come on. I don't know, the hatches aren't like they are. I like to do some good dry fly fishing. Now's a good time. Baptist Camp to Parker Ford has probably the greatest population of the trout in the stream. Well, maybe from Van Tanvat to Parker Ford. And one thing that goes along with that, though, is a lot more fishing pressure. I have found that if you're going to really get away from areas that are being fished heavily, bring a canoe or a kayak and head downstream from Baptist and I think you'll start finding that as you get on path will really increase. The population is good. The fish aren't hammered nearly as hard because not as many people are floating and fishing. More people are just putting it back, just waiting down for a half a mile or so and then fishing back, or fishing from Tambat down to Baptist. So get downstream about a mile and be prepared for an excellent day of fishing. Right now, today, we have so far, before I got on the Zoom, we had almost 3/4 of an inch of rain today. So the river's coming up. It's been at a pretty decent flow for a while now. And so you want to be prepared for that. But what advantage that gets you is if you do decide to float from Baptist down, you've got more water to float and less issues with having the portage and so on. So it's a good time. Now you got to also be aware that they do close the river occasionally when it gets too high. So you want to keep an eye on that. And you can go to the National Park Service, the Ozark National Scenic Riverways Facebook page, and they post the river closings there as well. So, and they'll tell you what section of the river would be closed or closed if it is. Generally speaking, Baptist, generally a lot of the closures are a lot further down. So that being said, I wanted to invite members to ask questions, if that would be acceptable.
Yeah, hi, Mark. This is Brian Ellis. I got a question. At one time, the NBC Trout Management Plan was to extend.
Breaking up.
Can you hear me? Was to extend the trout waters in Missouri by like 10 miles in 10 years. That was part of the NBC plan. And I guess I don't think it has been extended at all. But the question is, probably the most likely place or possible to extend it would be farther down below Acres Ferry. And I know that there was probably the National Park Service was kind of against that because it's trout are non-native species. But can you talk about that? Is there any chance that we could extend the trout water on the current river down below Acres?
Did we lose Mark?
Mark, you there?
I think you might be having some bandwidth issues.
Did you hear my question, Mark? I see you're back now.
You are on mute, Mark.
Are you talking on mute, Mark?
There, I'm back.
All right.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Mark, did you hear Brian's question?
Okay, against. I think I picked up on the gist of it. The Park Service is yes, against the idea of extending the trout waters because they are not indigenous to this stream, which I think is really kind of silly because they're already here and trout do make their way down that I know of. However, they're pretty hard and fast on that. And I know that when John Hoskins was the director of the Department of Conservation, he was really trying hard to get an audience with the Park Service on that subject. I know that was not successful. Now, whether or not there would be any chance of going on a new superintendent, and he's a great guy. Jason Lott, really fine man. He really cares a lot about what we're doing down here, and that might be a conversation I might try to have with him at some point down the road, because I think that it would be beneficial to the park as well as to that fish the river if we could the brown in particular down below Maple Spring. We have enough coming in from those springs, and I know it would support a good trout population. Now, you all are aware brown trout cannot successfully spawn in the current river because they're fall spawners, the water gets too warm and stuff. But rainbow, so if we were to be able to get some rainbow population started down there, they could take off on their own. Brown trout would, of course, have to be stocked. However, again, I just don't know if we have a snowball's chance of getting the Park Service to agree to allowing that to be extended.
Is there a
I wish I
fishable,
had better answers.
is there a fishable, do you fish much below acres, or are there many trout down that way? Low acres there?
I think we got a bandwidth problem.
Mark, can you hear us?
I'm back. All I got was, is there?
Mark, I'm wondering if it'd be better if you could dial in on your phone to this.
I'm back now.
Okay, can you hear us? It might be easier to dial in on your phone. Your video is not really working either. So at least on the phone we could hear you better,
Yeah.
probably.
I can hear you. Yes, I can sure do that. Okay,
Let me
I've got the number on the email you sent. I'll disconnect and I'll call.
okay. Thank you. And thanks everyone for your patience.
You bet.
It'll be nice when, this is just a fun thing we remember sometimes, having to do this over Zoom.
Jake, you're doing a great job. Just hang in there, buddy.
Oh, I mean, this is what I do all day at work, man. So this is nothing new.
So this is like overtime for you.
Yeah, a little more enjoyable.
What's the size of your average Zoom meeting at work?
Probably only like 10 people.
Yeah. Does it go smoothly most of the time?
It depends if it's all internal people or not. I've been doing a lot of calls with a company out in England. And those have been less than smooth. As you can imagine, especially trying to figure out the time zones.
Yeah.
Well, they're probably 6-7 hours difference, right?
Yeah, depending on daylight savings time, which they don't do wisely.
I think it's the president's job right now to provide us some entertainment. So is this,
I could sing, but you may not like it.
that's like a karaoke or something like that?
I got a harmonica. Will that help?
Let's go for it.
Now, Dan, you play guitar, don't you?
Yeah, mandolin, guitar, 12-string, harmonica, a little bit of fiddle. Yeah, a little bit.
In flute.
Thank God Mark is back. We don't have to
No
hear Dan play the fiddle.
Stop it.
All right, he is joining now.
Brian had some pretty good questions there. I hope we can get them all answered.
Yeah, the phone method worked great. One of the meetings, I was driving back from Montauk and listened to the whole meeting on the phone. That was great.
Oh, nice. Mark, can you hear us? Are you there?
I can't call from my cell phone because we have no cell coverage.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You're a little robotic, but we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
A little bit. You're a little choppy though.
Yeah, I was better than before on the video.
Yeah, I think if
Well,
you
the
actually turn your video off, it'll help
Phone
with,
number that is on the email. Okay. How's that?
that sounds good. Yeah, I think it might just be the
Is
video.
that better?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just leave that off. I couldn't get through on the telephone.
Ah, okay. So I think we're who had the last question then for Mark?
I think Brian did.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you answered my question about it's probably a slim chance to extend the trout waters on the current river below acreage area. But the next follow-up question is, what is the trout population before below acres theory now? Do you ever fish down there for trout below acres? Or is it
Yes,
just not worth it?
I've fished from I have fished from acres to Round Spring, and there are fish in there, but you really got to look for them. You really got to look for the good spot, you know, the hole that you know is going to hold trout, and there probably will be some in there. The population numbers are not very high. You know, out west, you might have 1,500 trout per mile. That stretch, you're lucky to have 100 fish per mile. So I'll give you an idea. Now, what you do start getting into as you get down in that area is more smallmouth population.
Yeah.
So where you start slacking down on the trout population, the smallmouth population starts to pick up.
That's good.
Did that come through? Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Mark, this is Dan.
You bet.
That pattern you talked about earlier, it'd be nice to, you send us a pattern or just a menu for it, just how to tie it and everything. That'd be nice.
Okay. Give me an email. You want me to just send it to you, Dan?
Yeah, that'll work fine. Thank you.
Okay. I'll do that. I'll get a chance on Monday or Tuesday. I'm off, and I'll sit down and do some. I'll tie it and photograph it as it's being tied, and then send the recipe with it as well.
What pattern
Thank
is
you.
that? What pattern is that?
It's one I came up with a number of years ago for, I was tying a pattern for, I was actually doing a demonstration fly tying at the state fair for the rural electric in their building. And while I was tying this little caddis idea, emerger idea, this guy came over and said, "Hey, can you use some of this?" And it was this really fine, clear, plastic coated copper wire. And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "It's taser wire." I said, "Well, I could try, sure." So he gave me a big wad of this taser wire, and I put down a green body and then ribbed it, or actually side by side ribbed the green body with this taser wire, which gave a nice copper segmentation to it. And then just put a soft tackle on it and a bead, and called it the electric caddis. And of course, the electric company thought that was wonderful. Well, I never caught any fish with it. So I decided to modify that pattern. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Lagatron French flat braid. The older man and wife that used to spool that and sell it in the US, he passed away. You can't really get it anymore. But I bought the last 4 spools that I could find. I had to go to the UK to get the last 2. And it was a Kelly green flat braid, Lagatron, and I used that for the body. Now, all you have to do is just find a nice metallic Kelly green flat braid of some kind, or even just a flat tinsel that's that color to use for the abdomen of this fly. And then up at the thorax, just put some black dubbing, and you got a black tungsten bead on there, and just between the dubbing and the bead, put a wrap of partridge hackle. Just as simple as that. And fish it as a soft tackle dry. Of course, it's going to sink because it's got a bead on it. And I always just float that under a dry fly. I have found that I can see the take better on a dry fly than I can on some sort of strike indicator. So generally, if it's a caddis and the caddis are hatching, my favorite pattern to fish a caddis hatch with is not an elk hair caddis, but a renegade. I fished a size 16 renegade. And I've caught an that's a trick I learned from my grandpa 50 years ago, 54 years ago. The renegade was his go-to pattern. And I kind of took up with that as well. So I really like the combination. I do catch more on the emerger when I'm fishing them tandem than I do on the dry. However, if I'm just fishing the dry, I'll go to a 16 instead of a 14 and catch them just on the dry. If they're coming up to the surface readily, then I'll go just dry. But if they're sporadically rising, but you can see them feeding down there on those emerging caddises, then I've got that electric caddis on there. And it's been very successful.
Mark, do you put a tail on that?
No tail.
No tail. And I use a caddis style hook or a dry fly hook, either one, and size 16. And I just wrap that body up and tie it off about 2/3 of the way up, tie it off, add a little black natural fur dubbing. I use a rabbit, and then I tie on the soft tackle. And of course, there's already a bead on there, black tungsten bead on there, and that's it. Very simple pattern, but I'll send you guys a picture of the fly and a couple of step-by-step photos and the recipe.
Yeah, I'll send it out when he sends it to me. So you guys got it.
Mark, this is Steve.
Hi, Steve.
I'm kind of new to fly fishing, and I've fished at Baptist camp and walked down, like you said, gets a lot of pressure there. How far of a river miles is it from Baptist camp to Parker Ford?
About 3 miles.
Okay, because Ed Heist and I, one time, during a huge rainstorm, we were down at Parker Ford working our way up, and I noticed that it seemed like that there's a rock bluff there where that little, I want to say, gravel road crosses the river there, and it seems like it doesn't hold a lot of trout because it has more like a sandy bottom. There's really not a lot of gravel or boulders or anything like that. Is that water between Baptist camp and Parker's Ford more brown trout water, or are there still a good population of fish? And what kind of fish species is there between Parker's Ford and Baptist camp?
Well, you're going to find some browns, of course, but you're also going to find rainbows. Now, that sandy bottom, that was from the flood of 2017. That didn't used to be like that. It was really nice and gravelly with some good rock boulders, but that big flood brought in a ton of sand. You'll notice it there at Baptist camp as well. It's a lot sandier on that first straight stretch there before you go around the bend. That's very sandy. The fish are still there. You just got to look for those little deeper pools and the rainbows are going to be more in the runs, and the browns are going to be in those deep pools. They like it a little slower than the rainbows do. But there's a lot of fish there between Baptist and Parker.
Would it be better to go at Parker and work up versus Baptist and work down to avoid the fishing pressure?
Well, Parker is, I like fishing Parker to Baptist, because that way I'm above that heavily pressured area. Now, if I'm taking out someone new, I start them at Baptist because it's easier fishing. You got that nice long straight stretch there. There's always something going on in the way of a hatch of some kind. And so even though it's heavily fished, they also stock a lot of browns along that stretch when they're stocking them. And so there's always a good chance you can get into a fresh stocking where you got a lot of those 10 to 12 inch browns in there to play with. So that's where I like to teach my classes, is right there. But if I'm taking someone that's experienced and just wants to fish the river but hasn't done it much, I take them to Parker and go down to Baptist.
You mean go up to Baptist?
I mean, go up to Baptist. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. And while you're at it, fish from Parker down to Cedar Grove. A lot of good fishing in there.
And how many miles of river is that distance off the top of your head?
Well, you're roughly halfway between at Parker. You're a little bit further than halfway, but not much. Halfway between Baptist and Cedar Grove is what Parker's roughly halfway between them.
All right. Any other questions from the membership? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you do.
Well, I'll ask another two questions if no one else has got anything. The water's cold going all the way down past Cedar Groves and stuff. And we know that your answer to Brian earlier is, the fish population, trout population, I should say, drops significantly, I guess, after Cedar Grove down to acres. But with the water being so cold, where do you say is the first good population of smallmouth in that upper stretch of the current?
Well, I've caught quite a few smallmouth just below the Cedar Grove Bridge slab there, that low water crossing, all the way down to acres, is a good population of smallmouth and a few trout. I've had days where I've caught probably an equal number of each smallmouth on that stretch. Not a bit unusual. To my first fish that I would catch after getting into the stream below the low water crossing at Cedar Grove would be a smallmouth. So, I mean, they're in there. Now, also, as you go down toward acres, you get down to Welch Spring. Now, Welch Spring kicks in 70+ million gallons a day into the river. That cools it back down, but also increases the size of the river by nearly double at that point. That adds to that stretch from Welch to acres, significant smallmouth habitat. It cools it down a little more, so the trout like it as well, but it adds a lot more deeper holes that the smallmouth really like. And I'll tell you what, if I was going to fish Cedar Grove to acres, I would concentrate on streamers all the way. Streamers from Cedar Grove all the way to acres. Either fish a black woolly boogers or olive woolly boogers, depending on watercolor, or maybe clousers, chartreuse and white, black and chartreuse. Any of those kind of streamers are going to be very effective for the smallmouth and for any browns that might have made their way down there. And of course, the large rainbows that hang out down there. You're going to find some pretty big fish down that way. Now, once you get to Welch Spring, right where the spring branch comes into the river, as you're looking downstream and the spring is coming in from your left, right past it, there's a big scour hole from where the branch comes in. That hole is always full of fish, both trout and smallmouth. I've caught them both in there and never failed to catch a fish there. So that's something you want to make sure that's a honey hole I'm telling you about right there. Little insider information. Now you can't fish in the branch itself from the spring down. You can only fish it where it comes into the river. But right where it comes into the river, just downstream of the actual branch itself, you'll see it, big hole right there, and you got to fish that. It will impress you every time.
And Mark, the second question I had, and I don't know if this is too far downriver for you to know, but they were supposed to be, I guess, rehabbing the cabins at Big Springs State Park. And I kind of think
Yes.
that fell behind schedule with COVID and everything. Do you have any idea on the time schedule of when they're going to get those cabins all rebuilt?
I don't know when they're going to get done. The park has had issues with funding back and forth. They're working on it. I do know that. And I know that they're hoping to have them done this year, but I don't know. I don't have a timetable on that. I don't work that part of the river at all. And all I catch is tidbits of information coming upriver. I wish I could check into that and see if I can get information, and I could send it to Dan and he could forward it on to you. I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, that's okay. It's not that important. I just know my wife and I wanted to go down there, and for the last couple of years, it hasn't been available. One time we stayed at the landing, but we couldn't stay at the park because they just were behind schedule on redoing the cabins.
Have any of you tried staying at Echo Bluff State Park, the new state park?
I've went
They've
to
got
it, but
some
I've never
beautiful
stayed at it.
cabins. They're really nice facility. And if you like fishing that stretch of the river, that's a great place to stay. If you're wanting something better than a tent, or drag a camper down, they got some beautiful cabins there. Nice restaurant, good lodge. I'm not a state park employee, but I can tell you as a resident of the area, I'm pretty impressed with the quality of what they offer there.
I thought I heard they're actually trying to add on to it and expand it, aren't they, Mark?
I heard a rumor about that, but I've heard nothing solid about it. So I would not say that that's a fact.
Yeah, I was there a few months back, and they've done a really nice job on that park. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And if you ever get a chance to fish Sinking Creek that runs by the lodge, that's some really fine smallmouth fishing when you get up a little ways. Now you got to be careful. There's a lot of private property upstream too. And some of those folks are not real happy about folks coming up that way on the stream because they own both sides of the creek. So you got to float it. If you stand on the gravel on the bottom, you're trespassing.
Well, I guess that's where Dan, get that letter from Jay Nixon will be helpful.
What
I'm getting a
I don't know
slow
about this letter. What is that?
I'm getting a real slow response on that. When he was up on it, we asked Nixon to give us a little legal description of what you can do on what the stream rights are basically for fishermen, basically. And he was going to write a little 1-page for us to kind of hold in our pocket as we go fishing that areas in case we ever get asked about it. But he hasn't followed up on that lately. I've asked a couple times and he hasn't followed up. I don't know what's going on. So a little disappointed, but we'll get on it.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you one thing, one little piece of advice. No matter what the legalities may be, if you are approached by a landowner who is telling you to leave, it's better to leave because you got to remember where you are. You're deep in the Ozarks. you're better off to go find another place to fish if the landowner is giving you a hard time. Don't get into a pissing match with a landowner. That's just personal opinion. It's just not worth it. There's so many great places to fish. You're better off to just pack up and move somewhere else.
Could be moonshine involved.
I couldn't hear you.
I said there could be moonshine involved.
That's right. And being a fellow moonshiner, someday you guys will have to come down here and taste a little of my stuff.
Mark, you said that you
Go
take
fish with me.
Mark, you said that you
Do
sometimes
what?
take students up and teach them how to fish around Baptist Camp. Do you actually give classes on the river?
Oh yeah, all the time. I've been giving classes for years down here.
Can you tell us what your contact information is, either phone number or email to reach you?
Yes, I can give you my both. My email is 3 words all in one. Feather, as in chicken feather, feather cutter farm @gmail.com.
Okay.
I bet you could figure out where that feather cutter comes from. And the phone number is 573-858-3075. That's my home landline. We have no cell coverage down here.
Okay.
In fact, my internet is satellite. So that gives you an idea.
Right.
But yeah, if you're interested in the class, give me a holler sometime.
I might just do that. Thank you very much, Mark.
I'd go for the moonshine.
Yeah, some of the guys that, yeah, I'll have some of that with me most likely. Some of y'all have used my book, Fly Fishing A to Z. That's the textbook I teach from. And of course, I provide every student with copies of that. I think you all have used them in some of your classes.
What's
Mark, this is Mark. Got a quick question for you. You were talking about the streamers down there where Welt Springs comes into the river. What size are you using on those?
Well, it just kind of depends on what I'm going for. If I'm fishing streamers for trout, I'm going to use probably, well, generally speaking, I'm going to use an 8. If I'm going for the smallmouth, I might go with something a little bigger, a 6, even up to a 4 occasionally. But generally then I'm switching to my 6-weight rod instead of my 4 or 5-weight rod. So it just kind of depends on what I've got, what I'm fishing with. If I start out fishing for trout with my 4 or 5 weight, I'm going to stick with a size 6, a size 8 or even a 10.
Thank you.
You bet. Do you guys know a gentleman by the name of Tom Shipley?
Sure, Brewer and Shipley.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Brewer and Shipley, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Tom lives in Rolla, and he and I used to fish together a number of years ago, and his favorite current river fly was a Thunder Creek streamer. And I never did have the luck with it that he has, but he loved that. And his favorite time to fish it is when the water is just like it is right now, a little off color and a little bit up. And he would just slay him with a Thunder Creek in red and yellow. That was his top color.
Could you add that to the list you're sending me?
Oh, the Thunder Creek? Sure. I'll put together a nice list of flies for you. If you're ever down this way and you're going to Cedar Grove and you're in Jadwin, there's a little gas station convenience store there called the Outpost. And they've got some boxes of flies of mine there for sale. and they're labeled current river flies or whatever. And that is a sampling of the flies that I like the best on this river. So you stop in there and kind of take a look. You don't have to buy them, just look and see what's in the box, and that'll give you an idea.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I have another question. Mark, I guess at the beginning of the program, you mentioned, well, the brown trout don't spawn successfully in that upper section of the Front River. Are you aware of the efforts at Westover Farms that they're doing, trying to establish brown trout there? And what's your thoughts about establishing a wild brown trout population in the current river?
Well, I am not aware of what they're doing. I haven't heard about it. I know I'm a long old friend of former trout biologist who's passed away a few years ago, Spencer Turner. And Spencer and I have talked, I couldn't tell you how many hours, about what it would take to get a good wild brown trout population going. But basically, it never did work. He tried triploids, he tried everything in the world to try to get those brown trouts to start spawning later in the year, towards, become winter spawners. And they just were not successful. And if anybody can do it, I think Spencer could have done it. And he just could not make it work. Now, that doesn't mean somebody else might not come along with a great idea that does work. So far, I haven't heard of it. But what he told me, and what we kind of agreed to over the years, is that about 1 to 3% maximum will survive. That's the highest percentage of survival rate to expect of a fall spawn brown trout. Now, I don't know what Westover's doing. I'd be curious to find out. Possibly they're spraying. If the fish are being spawned right at the spring, it might be a little more successful, and that the water temperature might be a little more consistent. When you take something the size of the Current River, as large as it is, it's going to have more impact to it by the weather. A small little spring-fed creek like that at Westover would have. In other words, it's going to potentially get warmer. You're going to get warm summer rains and get good runoff, and you're going to bring the water temperature up in spite of the nice 58-degree springs coming into it. So you do have that radical late summer adjustments in temperature that's simply impossible to change on a river that size. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but I really would be curious to find out.
Yeah, this is Ed Heist. Well, I was there when they planted those, and what they're doing is they're using the vibrant boxes. So the vibrant boxes are, you don't plant actual swimming fish, you plant what are called eyed eggs, which are fertilized eggs. They're basically embryos that are developing. And what you do is you put those into the gravel in the wintertime, and then they hatch out. And that's what they did in Arkansas in the Red River project several decades ago. And it resulted in Arkansas, where they do have a natural spawning population there. So that's what they're trying anyway. So that sort of would be the difference.
Well, I can see where they would successfully spawn if they're in the eye stage. The 14 days, the eye stage is the most critical point in the egg development for water temperature. If they are putting those in the winter, yeah, they would be successful at raising those fish. But now those fish, when they become adults and get ready to spawn, are going to go right back to fall spawning. And you're going to be right back. So what you're going to have to do is every year you're going to have to fry in our 14-day eggs in vibrant boxes on a continual basis to be able to build up any kind of population. They're not going to naturally start reproducing on their own successfully as long as they spawn in the fall, except on those rare occasions where you've had a cooler summer. And so then you might get that 1 to 3% success in the population. However, that's just what I know. And I am not the know-all of this, that I'm a fish biologist, but not a trout biologist. And what I do know, and what I know, I just don't see that it's going to be successful in raising a lot of successfully spawning browns. All I see is that you're essentially stocking brown trout at a younger age. is basically all they're doing. That makes sense? Or am I just talking out my rear?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I remember that's one of the things Spence said is, he put out a paper saying the eggs died on day 13, supposedly because the water was too warm. And when I went to peer review, he caught a lot of flack because he speculated on why that stage was dying. And basically he didn't know for sure. And so it's sort of left it at that, but he strongly suspected that the water was too warm when they were trying to spawn. And because they were spawning too early, like you said.
Turned it down.
Right.
Yes, it's working.
Well, all I know is they do have successfully spawning brown trout in Arkansas, and I don't know that you could argue that that's necessarily warmer or colder than Missouri streams. There's differences with tailwaters and with the springs and distributions of springs and how far you are from the springs. There's a whole lot of variation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and the tailwater definitely stays colder. So that does allow for successful brown trout spawning in those tailwater. Absolutely, it does, because that water coming out of the bottom of that dam stays at that temperature no matter what the environmental temperature is around. And so, yeah, that's why they have successful brown spawning in Arkansas. Now, had we had that same tailwater up here on the Current River, which I'm glad we don't, but if we did, then we could have some successful brown trout spawning as well. Because those tailwater outlets are constant.
But aren't the springs in Missouri the same temperature roughly as those tailwaters?
Well, actually, the tailwaters are a little bit colder, but that's not the point. The tailwaters are more consistent.
Right.
The springs will come in. They empty into a body of water that's already been heated up by summer temperatures, summer rain runoffs, etc. So if the river itself could stay the same temperature as those springs, we would have successful spawning, but it doesn't. It does influence the temperature, but it doesn't stabilize it enough in those late summer temperatures. Is that, in other words, you're diluting the cold when it comes into the warmer body of the main channel. Whereas with the tailwaters, that's constantly never changing, and it's a little bit colder than our springs. Our springs come out about 56 to 58 degrees, and the tailwaters a lot of times are coming out of the bottom of there at 42 degrees, and sometimes higher, of course, but a lot colder.
Well, you have Mill Creek that's had spawning rainbows since 1885. Documented.
Yeah, the rainbows do well in there.
Yeah, right.
It's charging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was.
When it's making that noise, it'll start going down.
Yeah, we have
Anybody
a number
else?
of springs.
Mark,
I
what
might
town
add,
do
we
you,
have a number of. Go ahead.
what town do you live in Missouri, Mark?
I don't live in a town. I live out in the middle of nowhere. I'm about a mile and a half downstream from Acres Ferry.
Oh, okay.
I'm 30 miles south of Salem.
Okay. I was just curious because of your reception, and you say you fish, Baptist camp and Parkers and all that kind of stuff. I was just kind of curious, where you are in conjunction with that, section of the river and stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I'm about a mile and a half below Acres, but I can sit on my front porch and watch the fog come off the river in the mornings. So I'm down here, on the river, plus my job as a park interpretive ranger, I'm up and down the river constantly. If I'm upstream at 5 o'clock, I can drag out a fly rod and start fishing.
How long does it take you to get up to like Montauk Park itself?
From my house, it takes about 35, 40 minutes because I live so far back and I'm down a gravel road. It takes me 10 minutes just to get to the highway from my house.
Well, that's not
And
that
then
bad.
it's going to take me another 30 minutes to get to Montauk. No,
Yeah,
it's
that's not that bad. It took me that long to go to work every morning, and I live in the city.
Yeah. There you go. So I'm looking forward to you coming down and fishing with me.
Yeah, don't be surprised. I will probably try to make an effort to do that.
Oh, it'd be great. Any of you on this call, if you ever want to come down and fish, just give me a holler and make sure I'm available. We'll go. Now, with my job during the summertime, I work weekends. I'm off during the week, which is actually a better time to be on the river anyways, but I'm off on Mondays and Tuesdays. And that way you don't have nearly the crowds.
What do you do for the Park Service, Mark? Do you do slideshow presentations and stuff like that?
I'm an interpretive ranger. I give programs. I rove the river and visit with people on the river. I help them understand the concept of safety on the river. And then I tell the history of some of the places. For example, Welch Spring, at 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday, telling people about the history of Welch Spring. We have a family connection to that. My wife's great-great-great-grandfather was land granted that property in 1789 for fighting in the Revolutionary War. And then he didn't actually get to take possession of it, though, because at that time the French owned it as part of the Louisiana Territory. And then in 1803, the United States acquired that land, and then he moved on to it. And the family had it until 1913 when that doctor built that asthma and emphysema health resort there. So it's got a lot of history to it. There was a mill there at one time, lots of good stuff that people want to hear about. So I tell stories. And I try to keep people out of the spring and try to make people stay legal and do the right things while they're on the river. And that's always fun, especially after they've been floating with beer for about 3.5, 4 hours. But I'm not law enforcement. I'll put that out. I'm eyes and ears, but I'm not law enforcement. I'm a storyteller.
All right, thank you,
Speaking
Mark.
of which,
Anybody
don't
else have
forget Moonshine and Watermelons.
We can't hear it, Kenny.
It's a good book. I read it. I like the Robin Hood Creek, though.
I hear somebody, but I can't hear what they're saying.
That might be a TV. Does anybody else have any other questions before we end the meeting? I have time for one more. All right, Dan, you want to close us out then?
Okay, folks, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Mark, thank you very much. And we should fish sometime. That's gotta have a little day trip down there sometime, I think. So, and I'm retired, so Monday, Tuesday work for me. And I know Steve
Excellent.
also.
Yeah.
So yeah. Sounds like a date.
You
Thank
guys come
everybody.
down together. We'll both go.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, this adjourns the
Thank you,
meeting.
guys.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you much.